Hey guys, welcome to The Medicine with Girds and Te'o. Benny, let me start by just saying, Dan, our producer, our beloved producer, have you seen his new haircut? What do you think?
Who did it?
What did you think? I think Prue's taken the scissors to her husband through the week.
It's a high cut. I wouldn't call it a fade because it doesn't fade from one thing to another.
No.
It just goes from straight zero to a
Yeah.
long haircut.
Yeah.
So, interesting.
Yeah, definitely definitely something that I'm sure he's looking forward to growing out at some point. How's your week been, buddy?
Yeah, it's been different. We got the bye this weekend, Redcliffe Dolphins. So no game. There's no games on in the competition this week. So probably missing that adrenaline kick.
Yeah.
You know, waiting for that game you sort of build up all week, and whether it's a win or a loss, you think you become addicted to that competition. So nothing this week, but it was my son Rudy. It's his 3rd birthday this week, so been organising
Happy
parties,
birthday, Rudy.
and party bags and
What's in the party
pinatas.
bag?
Party bags, Freddos, lollipops,
Yeah.
Skittles, and then getting down to the bowls club yesterday, pinata, watching the kids smack that thing. It's a big thing over here.
The pinata?
The pinata,
we went through a pinata period as well.
I think it's quite dangerous because the kids just come too close towards it.
Always make sure you're videoing the pinata, because if something's going to happen, it's not going to be good, but at least you're going to have it on camera.
But I love that point where it smashes and all those lollies come out, and human nature comes out in all the kids.
Yeah.
Right? They just go for it and they just smash each other out of the way, and the big kids get all the lollies, and the little kids get 3 lollies. That's just the way.
Yeah.
It's the way of the world.
Are you one of those big kids?
Yeah, I kicked a few kids to get some lollies. It's been
cool.
flat out in some parts, but not much footy wise. And what about you?
It's been a really confronting week, actually. I think kind of the full awareness of what we're doing on the podcast, became really apparent to me through the week, and especially with we asked the community to reach out. And I think a lot of people really connected with the conversations we had, especially about transitioning out of professional sport. And mate, for some reason, I've been developing tools over a long period of time to deal with those parts of my life, I thought. But it became really apparent that there was some stuff in there that I hadn't processed. And brother, it was a dark week. I just removed myself from all sort of family life, and just went into the cave and wrestled the bear. Yeah. And I didn't come out until yesterday, and I'm exhausted, brother. Yeah, I'm really, it's been really emotional week. And I just, there just must have been some things in there that I needed to sit with again and really feel the turbulent nature of what it was like to go through it when I did. And I don't know why that came back to the surface after the discussions. Obviously, they sort of preempted it. But, so dealing with that's been really difficult. And it took me back, and I actually then started, remembering those moments. Because for me, it was like, 16, 17 years ago. Wow. And I remember, not having the skills, because I think, when you're in a predominantly male-dominated sport, some of the skill sets, and I grew up with, one brother and a father, and, 70s and 80s, men were men, and emotions and vulnerability and those sort of things probably weren't dealt with. It was just find a way to get through it, overcome it. And that's the masculine way, right? So for me, when I first retired, I didn't have a family. So I didn't have like normal life. I just was, as we spoke about last week, I was just there and left to my own devices, and without a skill set of understanding what I needed to do in relation to whether it was communication. I was disconnected with community because I moved away from where I'd grown up to go to Penrith and then retire, and I was living on the northern beaches, so I didn't have community around me. Yeah. And I just thought that I needed to deal with shit on my own. And how I did that when I first retired, the outlet for me was alcohol. And I got to the point where I was drinking a lot, right? and I was getting in fights, right, 33-year-old guy. But I wasn't angry at the people that I was having the altercations with. I was just angry at myself because I didn't know where I was. And I remember this one night I had a full-on altercation, and to the point where I actually thought that I was going to get locked up because I'd done a fair bit of damage, right?
Yeah.
And I got home and I remember I had like blood and stuff all over my hands, and I'm sitting on my couch on my own in my house at about like 4 a.m. with no one around, no one to talk to or communicate with, thinking, who the hell am I?
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
And I had nowhere to go, and I had no skills in place to kind of deal with that, and I didn't think there was anyone that I could talk to or communicate with. And I know there's a lot of people out there, and a lot of people have reached out through the week that go through this, and understanding that there's things out there that you can do. And then that was kind of the beginning of me trying to realize that it's going to be a really destructive time of my life if I don't get off my ass and do something about it. And that's what that was for me the catalyst of then just starting to look at different ways to develop as a person and get back into society. So I went through that. I went through a lot of things around. I lost the ability to communicate when I first retired. Like I used to just put headphones on and walk around the streets with no music in them, just so people wouldn't talk to me because I didn't know, because I felt like because I was limited with my education, I didn't have anything to say. You know, so I just went through all that, and all these things came sort of rushing back in this week, and it was a really difficult week for me. So I had to get that out.
Yeah.
Just got to, I think I had to come in and send that message because it'd been eating me up all week.
Yeah.
So now I can let it go.
Because you said you were coming in here. You said you were coming in here and you felt nervous, right?
Yeah, I was nervous today.
Yeah. So do you think, obviously, you feel you did deal with those things back then, but this is just a little bit of a flashback, or you're starting to think now,
Don't know.
maybe I didn't fully deal with it?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe I put things in place to make me move on from it without actually processing what it was.
Yeah.
And maybe and I came out of it thinking that I don't have the answers, and that's okay as well, because I think in the masculine, where the expectation in society is that, or within family life, it's, struggle, find a way to pay the mortgage, bring up the kids, be everything to everyone, but internally really just fighting the battle. And I know guys connect with that because, and so for me, it was just always, it's been this week, it's been being okay with not actually having the answer and knowing that all of that was part of my journey that got me to here. And now with, the way that I am with family and community and my open and my connection to, being able to be vulnerable and connect with people at a different level, it just shows me that all of that was just part of my journey that got me to here, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
But I honestly had to sit with that this week.
Would some of your ex-teammates, how do you think that they'd see some of this stuff? Would they see it as, oh, good, I didn't even know this, you should have told me, brother? Or would they be more along the lines of they probably went through something similar?
I think a lot of guys go through something pretty similar, but it just depends on, on the environment that you've created when you were playing. So for me, I was very selfish. I knew that it was really important for me that I didn't have a lot of distractions, because I kind of felt like I was only good at one. I could only really do one thing really well at a time. And for me, that needed to be the game. So relationships and all that stuff was on the back burner, because for me, it was all about just delivering the product.
Yeah.
And so what happens when you are that focused and you're that single-minded on one thing, when that thing's not there anymore, all the other stuff that, some people in life have put around them, for moments of vulnerability, I didn't have. I hadn't created those pathways.
Yeah. Well, you essentially retired and you didn't have a stable home in terms, you didn't have family, you didn't have kids.
Nothing.
No, you saved all that stuff for post footy.
Yeah.
So that was,
Yeah, so that transition was really difficult, and so a lot of guys that would be surprised by that went through similar things but had the support networks around them.
Yeah.
So that was just my choice, something that I was unaware of at the time, but something that probably made the transition just for me just a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I think I got a little bit of feedback about just being open and honest about our journeys and how we've gone through the transition. And I had a couple of ex-teammates reach out privately and sort of mention that some had finished up or some were coming towards the back end of their career, and they were scared. They were scared. They didn't know what they're going to do. And I think I've played with a lot of guys that almost were perfect for the rugby league setup. I had some players that I played with that were, tough, trained hard, great team guys, humor in the locker room, could make the team laugh, run around the sheds nude or whatever they had to do to get the mood up, right? And then you take that and you try and translate it to the real workplace. Tell me a job that will hire you because you can bench press, run a good Bronco test, you're tough, and you run around the office nude to make everyone laugh. I mean, it doesn't translate. So I've got a lot of guys that just been in that environment for so long and wondering, I've been pretty good at this, but now what do I do? So I'll keep looking out for those jobs because I wouldn't mind one of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind one either. I'd be really good at that. Hard to get a spot there, though, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. There'd be a few.
Yeah, so so that's been an interesting phase to go through when I'm 50 years old. But anyway,
I think I drove out of here. I think I texted you when I left. I said, "Did I leave a podcast or a therapy session?" Because I was just honest about how I felt with it, and then probably after doing the podcast for the whole week, probably had to think about it a lot more than I would have before about what parts of the game I missed, and still do that same thing. Went out and trained a couple of times and started to think, I could still play. Yeah, it's that little thing that keeps creeping in, but then you got to remember all the things that you couldn't do.
That's right.
You just couldn't back up week to week. You're getting old, and it is hard to let go. And that's why I always said in last episode that it's a process.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers, but just keep soldiering on.
And I think that's the thing for people out there to understand and to normalise this sort of communication. It's really important, that me and you can have this conversation. And I was always, and I think as a professional athlete, you're very conscious of your private life because your work life is so public and you're in the public eye with everything, right? And then all of a sudden, someone wants to look behind the curtain of what's going on in your private life, and you're like, hang on a second, no, everything, all the walls go up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, for to be sitting here and just, being so vulnerable and knowing that this is actually going to go out to the general public is been something that, it's been a real internal battle for me all week. Yeah. But it's done now, and I'm happy about it because, people need to know that, regardless of the amount of, what things look like on Instagram or what they think about someone, with business and, what their professional life's been like, that stuff is real for everyone. Yeah. And so, the tools are out there. And I think at some point with this podcast, where we're going to go is we're going to start, giving people opportunities to look at what some of those tools may be and, help them along on their journey as well.
Yeah. Because I think I've said some things on here I probably haven't even told my partner. I was driving the other day. I was driving the other day, and I saw my mother-in-law going for a walk with her headphones in. So I pulled up in front of her, and I wound down the window, and I said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm just listening to your podcast." I said, "Oh no." She goes, "I've learned a lot," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's good." So I think this is going to be a good vehicle to sort of let some of that stuff out, and exactly what you said, get some tools out there to people because. Different industries, right? Same problems.
How good is it to see the Warriors doing well? I mean, I know you're still a little bit, you still haven't let go of what happened, back then in those days, in the early part of your life in New Zealand. But, from everyone in the NRL, everyone must be enjoying what the Warriors are up to. And again, last night, a really convincing win against quality opposition. The Raiders just never went away, found a way to get back into that contest, sent it to Golden Point. But the man, Sean Johnson, what a season he's having, was able to get it done. What have you made of their season so far?
Well coached, I think Andrew Webster's done a great job. You know, last year I spent a lot of time around the Warriors because they were based in Redcliffe. So a lot of their young, good junior kids coming through, I coached them in my 21 side. So I saw them train a lot, and I just looked at their squad and I thought to myself, they could be going a lot better. They've got some real talent in that side, but they're just not putting it together. That was just my assumption. But then to take, Andrew Webster, he's been around a lot. He's been an assistant for a long time through different clubs, and he left that Penrith system, and he must have taken a couple of things, whether it's, about building a team that really gels together, but also, what's important to win. Some of the drills he would have taken, and he's brought it to the Warriors, and they're a different side. The way that they attack at the moment, like they're so crisp and organised, and their scramble defence is massive as well. And I think looking at Sean Johnson, he's had his ups and downs in his career, I think. And looking from afar, I reckon he thought maybe this was his last year. All the weight's off his shoulders. He's had COVID. He can finally go home and play in front of the fans. And I think he probably just wanted to go out on his terms and just found this form. And he's just playing so free, and he was the money man, last night with that drop goal.
We'll get into some of the individuals a little bit later, because I think we've all got our thoughts on, especially playmakers that develop different parts of their games. It's just one of those positions that when you come in and you can look at the way that sort of Benji went through it, it's all about the flash and doing all those things early on. And then you transition into an older guy that realises what your actual role is in relation to getting the team around the park. And then the really good ones, like we're seeing with Johnson and what Benji did at the back end of the career, can just combine both.
Yeah.
And I find that's what's happening with Sean Johnson at the moment. He's still got that part of his game, and that comes from like the hard work and the physical parts of the game, which are really hard to do at the back end of your career, come from the work that he's doing now, as opposed to probably early days leaving that to other people and knowing that his role was to convert opportunities or to be that guy. But now he's actually found a way to enjoy the more difficult parts of the game at later stage of his career, which has given him new life. But in relation to Webster, like we saw him, he got the role at the Tigers as an interim coach. What was that, like 3 or 4 years ago? And he honestly looked like a deer in the headlights. And it was a overwhelming position that he found himself in, and it looked like that from the outside. There was so much work to be done there at the Tigers. Surprise, surprise. But his demeanour, you spoke about him being in that Penrith system and how he'd just learned to have success. And that's one thing, being in a system, and we spoke about the difference between being a head coach and being an assistant coach. You're managing the relationships. You're doing all the stuff with the corporate partners. I mean, the responsibility falls at you, right? But he's been able to go over there with all of that after really only being a successful assistant coach and apply that to a system that's been broken for a while. What is it about the way that he's coaching, going about his business, that's getting the best out of that team?
Oh, just looking at them, I would say probably the biggest improvement, they must be training better. They must have had a massive off-season because they just look different in terms of their physical shape. I think they recruited very well. Mitch Barnett. I just think if you look at the Warriors in years gone by when they were successful, they always sort of went and got these guys that fit what they are. So they're a big team. Look, they're always going to have a lot of Polynesian boys. They've got a lot of power, right? A lot of speed, right? But you need those endurance athletes around to complement them. Back in the day, they used to have guys like Kevin Campion. They went and got guys like Michael Luck. All right, now they went and got Jackson Ford, and they got Mitch Barnett. You got Dylan Walker in the middle of the field, who's sort of that link. He's that link between the forwards and the backs, and it's really opened things up. So I just think there's probably a lot of parts to it. And I think it's just timing too. I think it's timing. Maybe you just spoke about before when Webster first got his go, and he was probably a deer in the headlights. He's probably learned and evolved a lot since then, and now he's probably oozing a lot more confidence. And the players, once you got them and they believe in you and they trust that what you're teaching is translating on the field to wins, and you got them. They're in, you know. And we would have sat here last year and talked about who's the best coach, and the media beat up was about Serraldo, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No one was talking about the other assistant coach.
Well, let's talk about that.
Penrith.
Well, let's talk about the difference. I mean, you've got one guy that's gone over there and probably going to get Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
And you got another guy in Cam Serraldo. It's taken off he's taken a big bite of the pie. But he's still got a decent roster.
Yeah.
So, what are the shortcomings of the Bulldogs at the moment?
Well, I would have to say they've lacked the halves. Yeah, they've gone and got Toby Sexton, but early on in the season, I think they lacked the halves. Matt Burton, for me, I still think he plays pretty well as a centre.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he can do a job at 6, but they never really had that 7. So I think that they struggle with that. Then the injuries. I said the Warriors, when I looked at their squad last year, I just thought they should be going a lot better. Yeah. I don't think there's as much talent in the Bulldogs squad. I'll give Serraldo that.
Yeah, but talent's one thing, effort's another.
Yeah.
Do you think that, I thought one thing that Cam Serraldo would be able to get out of the Bulldogs, I thought he'd be able to bring their best and their worst just a little bit closer together.
Yeah.
And I just think sometimes, and I think we saw it a couple of weeks ago when they got beat by 66 points, I just thought that those sort of performances were going to be behind them with a guy like Cam Serraldo coming in with the success that he's been at Penrith. So I can understand all the storylines about the injured players, lacking certain positions, but all in all, got a decent squad that should be competitive on a weekly basis, and I think that's what the Bulldogs fans are disappointed with at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, their expectation was that, there was still going to be some tough times, but not these type of tough times, not these big score lines put on them. And because for all that you hear and what the media has told you, because you only hear through the media, is that Serraldo, he's the next gun coach, he's a defensive coach, he's the next guy.
Yeah. But
it's obviously not working at the moment, isn't it? And that's what I'm saying is when it's not, you can easily start to lose some of your players, if they don't believe in what they're doing is working and can't get them results, because they're the ones under the pump too.
Yeah.
They're the ones copping it, not just the coach, they're the ones copping it. So where they go to now, I don't know, it just looks like they're trying to buy their way out through Penrith. They're using Penrith as their junior system, and Gus and Serraldo are sort of buying players out, and I think that'll make a difference. But
they need a 7. You hit the nail on the head. Like, they need a genuine playmaker in there. They're going to have Crichton coming in next year. Kick-out comes back over the weekend.
There's no halfbacks out there.
But there's not a lot of halfbacks on the market unless they get someone like Benny Hunt, unless they find a way to manipulate that deal. It just doesn't seem like they're going to have that genuine playmaker in the near future. Your old club, the Tigers.
Yeah, West Tigers.
Yeah, it's been a storyline now for a couple of years, to be honest. It was exciting, wasn't it, when they announced Benji, and then the way they were going to transition him through, and the experience there of Tim Sheens, and I mean, I looked at that and went, that can work. I mean, I know you've got your own thoughts about guys that come in to a coaching role without experience.
Yeah,
and you can talk to that. And that's exactly what they've done, and that was always going to be the risk with Benji, wasn't it? Because came out of the game, did a bit of stuff in the media, didn't really go back into any pathways or didn't spend any time in New South Wales Cup, was elevated straight into that role. And it's not like he was elevated into a role at a club that had it, all their ducks in a row.
Yeah.
He's been thrown into, an absolute, a shit fight, to be honest. What have you made of that decision by the club, where the Tigers are at the moment, and how would Benji be feeling?
Well, it just looks like they're always just trying to patch things up. Right? That's the the theme I get from them. Benji, finishing up, he knows a lot about footy, more than most people. So he's finished up, and I think towards the back end of his career when he was at South Sydney, from what I know, is he was almost a player coach.
Yep.
Yeah, he was very involved with the attack and the strategy and all those parts of the game. He probably went into the media and didn't feel as fulfilled, which a lot of players that I know do. They go into the media, but they miss the game. And, then he made that transition to come straight in, and it's going to be a tough job for him because even though he knows the footy and it's all up here, it's trying to build the other stuff off the field. And that's why apparently Tim Sheen's kind of meant to be there to hold his hand and help him through. But, I talk to people that tell me that at the moment, Benji Marshall is coaching that side. He is running the day-to-day, and Tim Sheens is almost taking the bullets, and he's that front man. So, I think Benji probably wouldn't feel too much pressure at the moment, and he's got time. They need to sort these things out in the background. Tim Sheens he's doing a brave job up there. Copping those hits, but I mean, I debuted at the West Tigers. It was always a club where you could feel that there was that, the West and the Balmain. You always felt that. And now more so, it's more of a West setup than Balmain. But from the backroom staff, it's just sometimes laughable, isn't it? Some of the things that they come up with. Even the fact, and I was excited when Benji and Tim were coming back because they've got West Tigers DNA.
Yeah.
But how it came about, you remember the story where Buzz says he's sitting at lunch with all the chairman and the CEO, and they've been knocked back by a couple of coaches, and he says, why don't you get Tim Sheens and Benji and this and that? And they looked at each other and they thought, yeah, and you think to yourself, no way. No way over lunch did you toss up an idea, Buzz Rothfield, right? And they looked at each other, the chairman and the CEO, and thought, that's a great idea. And they went, that can't be it.
Yeah.
There's surely more research.
If that's the indication of what's going on in the back office, it's
that's
a real
the story
concern.
about how Benji and Tim came about.
Yeah.
Remember? And they got rid of Michael Maguire. They got rid of a premiership coach, to go with what they've got at the moment. And now, the chairman cracks me up. Every time he fronts the media, I don't know if he's off to a dress-up party or what he's doing. Like, the only thing he's missing is a cigar and a cane. And sometimes I don't know why.
He needs to be. Yeah.
Why does he need he need? Can he just put on a nice suit and?
Yeah, I mean, I guess people want to hear from someone at the West Tigers, and Justin Pascoe just doesn't. Other than Tales from Tiger Town, I haven't seen that guy. I don't know what he's been getting up to. And I do like Lee. Lee was a corporate partner there at Triple M for a while, and he's a different cat.
Yeah,
he's got his own thing going on. I don't mind that. But for the back office to think that, they can start, I would imagine autonomy to a head coach is really important, really important, yeah? Because you're not only going to want, identify the certain players and people that you want to have working with you, but you also want to have open conversations around other parts of the business that are generally going to really have an impact on the results.
Yeah.
And recruitment's one of those things.
The biggest.
And I know that there's probably only a handful of recruitment guys out there that have built those relationships over time, and everyone wants one. There's probably not enough to go around. You guys have got one at the Dolphins. And so how could you get to that point, in the back office to think that without even consulting your head coaches, and you've got a few of them there, you could go out and pull the trigger on getting a recruitment guy in, and then hoping that relationship is all just going to be okay without going through the proper processes.
Look, the only thing I can think of is the fact that they would have talked to Scott Fulton, and maybe they knew that there was going to be pushback. Maybe they knew that there was going to be pushback from Tim Sheens and Benji Marshall, and they thought that instead of going through that pushback and dealing with all that, we're just going to pull the trigger on it because they think he's the right guy. Now, he might be the right guy. That's all I'm saying. I think he's highly rated in his work. He's just landed the two young brothers, the Fainu brothers. That's a big get. He's got connections through all that Manly system and all the way out west with Blacktown where they've been set up. He might be the right guy that can help them land some players, because we haven't really seen some like they've been landing older guys, but they haven't been landing top young prospects. These are two top prospects out of the under-19s New South Wales side that he's just landed. Now, no one's giving him much credit for it, but his relationship with those players and their family is what made it. Gus Gould went to the jail to see the older brother to try and build a relationship. Too late, mate. Scott Fulton's already got that relationship, probably with the mum and the dad. So what I'm saying is the West Tigers must look at him and think, yeah, it was going to ruffle some feathers, but he is the right guy. Yeah. And I think what you said is important. You know, there's not a lot of great recruitment guys out there, and there's a few, and the relationship needs to be good, but doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
Because they're always going to disagree. A head coach and a recruitment are always going to disagree on which players they want. Now, I just think with the Benji Marshall-Fulton thing, I just think they're going to make it work.
Yeah, that's right.
They need to go out to lunch. Where's a good
it's
good
ego.
steak? Good steak and beer.
There's a lot of ego involved in that sort of behaviour as well.
Much.
And I think initially it probably was that. It probably wasn't about, Benji not liking who or the personality that was brought in. He was probably not liking the way that it was brought in.
Yeah.
And the fact that he didn't have any control or wasn't sort of engaged in any conversations about that decision, feeling like if moving forward they've signed me to a 5-year deal, and the results are going to fall on me, well then I want to have a little bit more control over those parts of the business. And I can understand that, but I can also understand that apparently there was a lot of player managers out there saying that, their clients were concerned that some of the infrastructure at the West Tigers wasn't where it needed to be, and therefore, they were looking elsewhere. Yeah. That's a concern as well for a club. It's not ideal from a player's perspective, but there's generally there's drama at every club, right? Yeah. It's how it's dealt with.
Well, there is. We talk about the drama at the West Tigers at the moment. We just know about it. It seems like they really need to sit down all together from the top down and discuss where are we heading. But boys, how is all this stuff getting out? And we've got to come together as a team for the club and keep things in-house and work in the same direction, because it seems like, they could have a meeting or someone doesn't get invited to a meeting, then now it's a secret meeting and everyone in Australia knows about it at the West Tigers.
That has to come back to the fact that there's two boards, right? Or there's one board, but, we speak about those, the club and the factions and the fact that you've got the Wests and the Tigers and just too many people hearing about the details and then, just this leaking it out.
Yeah, and it also comes from players or coaches and managers and all that. So it comes from all directions, but I think you'd be surprised about some of the drama that goes on at clubs that are in the top 4. Yeah. Right? There's stuff all the time, I think, my time at South Sydney, we always sat for 2 years there. We sat up in that sort of top 3 of the comp. We had dramas. There was things going on, and it's funny when I caught up with Michael Maguire a year ago, and we sort of had a coffee and chat about some things, and he was helping me with my coaching journey and some of the issues that he was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It was crazy. The fires that he was putting out, the personalities he was trying to get to go together. Yeah, he was dealing with Shane Richardson. He was dealing with Russell Crowe, and trying to keep them at arm's length from the team in terms of us focusing on what we need to do. And as a player, you don't even know that stuff's going on. You're not even thinking that, there's certain coaches or members of staff that don't get along, but you just got to get the job done, right? And I think that's the difference at the moment. It seems like every little thing comes out of the West Tigers. Everything comes out of the Dragons. And maybe that's part to do with what you just said there. Yeah. It's a merger, right? So there's two sides of it always. At some stage, got to come together.
They've got to come together, right? Yeah. I think that's been holding both of those clubs back for such a long period of time now. Everyone speaks about it. So,
yeah, and talking, I talk to Wayne a lot about, his coaching journey, and I think one of the main things was when he went to the Dragons, right, he made it work, didn't he?
Mm.
You know, the reason why he made it work, because Wayne's the boss. There was one boss, right? And I think that's always a really important part of the club.
It's a big process, you know, and getting yourself ready and making that decision around what's the right job is really important as a new coach, right? So what are you doing, you know, what sort of tools are you giving yourself to make sure that you're prepared when the right job comes around?
Well, I think when I first decided to coach 2 years ago, you know, Wayne being my mentor, the first thing was experience. Just go and do the job. You know, gave me my own team and said to go coach them at nights and see if I still love it. That's the first part. You got to make sure that you love it, and then the second part is to continue develop under good people. So you know, I lean on guys like Wayne Bennett, Michael Maguire, you know, Christian Wolf, but I also have a coach's coach, a guy called Darren Holder, and what he does is he comes out to my games. And you know, when I'm giving my pre-game speech or halftime, he's standing in the corner and he's taking notes. And when I'm up in the box coaching the game, he's doing all that sort of stuff. And then he writes me a report.
Yeah,
gives me some feedback.
How often does he do that?
He probably does that once a month. And that's an initiative that the QRL have done, which is great because what they do is they're sort of helping and they're investing in you and helping to develop you. And it's pretty confronting sometimes because you feel like you're coming across in a certain way, right? And when someone tells you that you're not, and maybe that your point's getting lost, it's quite hard to take. And that's what I'm saying is, you know, Benji hasn't gone through that, right? I'm going through this at under 21s level, at Queensland Cup level, and I'm getting people assess me quite hard. And I'm saying that's the part that maybe he's missing. I'm not saying that doesn't mean he can't be successful, but there's a lot of learning going on. You know, this week I went out to the Brisbane Lions and I sat in on one of their team meetings as they got ready. They're playing Geelong this weekend, which is a huge game for them. I watched them train out at the Gabba and just seeing the intensity and how they present their information is part of learning as well. And then I went to, there was a get-together with some of the Queensland Cup coaches, and I'm sort of one of the young coaches. You know, I'm 36 years old. I'm only 2 years into coaching, and I'm sitting around a table with a bunch of older guys at between, you know, 45, 55 years old. But it's really interesting to hear coaches talk about pressure, right? The pressure of coaching. And one of the words that came up was loneliness. And I can really relate to that. I've only been coaching a short time, but it's a tough job.
Yeah.
It's a really, really lonely job. And I think with the results, win or loss, you know, you got to sit with that and you take a lot of ownership with it. And it was interesting to sort of sit there and hear some really experienced coaches share their thoughts about how they're dealing with some of the tough times in coaching. And we spoke earlier about Trent Robinson, right? We spoke about Seraldo. I mean, wouldn't be much sleep going on. You'll be trying to figure out ways, and sometimes it's just the results that you want. A lot of the stuff is out of your control, but you dump it all on yourself. So I think, you know, coaching is one of the toughest gigs going around, and that's why I'm going the long route.
You sound excited.
I am excited. It's one of those parts though, like I get excited by the wins and the losses.
Yeah. And the learnings, right?
Yeah, and I like the ride, and I like to try and figure out what went wrong and how can we fix it and can we turn it around. Yeah, there's no doubt there's sometimes that it's tough to sleep and you got a lot of things buzzing through your mind. You're trying to manage 30 personalities, 10 staff, and trying to get everyone on the same page. I can only imagine what it's like at the next level with that scrutiny, but that's why a lot of people don't coach because they probably can't do it.
Or they stay assistants.
Or they stay assistants, yeah. So, yeah, I think Wayne's a thinker. You know, he's a quiet guy and he's a thinker, and I think he spends a lot of time on his own, you know, pondering his team and where they're at and what they need. So there's a big burden that a coach takes on, and I'm sure that the family takes it on too.
So, guys, we had our community send in some questions for the two of you, so we'd love you to answer them if you could. Benny, we'll start with you.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about some of those locker room guys before,
Yeah.
and obviously for what you can share on this platform, but do you have like a great locker room story that you could tell from your playing days? There was several of these questions from different listeners.
So I would say this. I played with some of the best players that the game's seen, but I think I played with some of the most unique characters too. So I remember coming through at West Tigers, super young, coming into the environment. They just won a competition, and there was Liam Fulton and Bryce Gibbs, and they were just characters. I think at the stage they were trying to make money on the side, breeding greyhounds, and I'm pretty sure that they were keeping them in their backyard at the time. So they were trying to, train these greyhounds to win the money at the track. We used to train at Concord Oval. Underneath there was no locker room to hang out. There was no common room. You sort of just sat amongst like treadmills and watt bikes is where you hung out, and everyone would sort of get bored when there was sort of 2 hours in between sessions. So those two would crank the treadmill up. They crank it up as high as it could go. And then, Bryce Gibbs he'd have a big Swiss ball and he'd jump on top of the treadmill, and then he'd just do like a double somersault backflip. So it was just sort of like, there was always guys just trying to entertain themselves at that stage. No NRL clubs fed you back then.
Yeah.
So we had a little trainer, used to run out and get bread, ham and cheese, and, here's the West Tigers NRL side was eating ham, cheese, toasties every day for lunch. This is 2007, 2008, so even then, like, probably a bit more professional than when you first started.
Yeah.
But we had some real characters. And then along from in that team, as a young kid, Bo Ryan was driving up from Wollongong. And
he's a unique character.
He's a unique character. So, me and Bo come through at the same time. We were the little young train and trial group, and there was a few of us in there. Tim Moulton was in there, Blake Ashford, myself, Bo Ryan. And, he was a character straight out of the gate. Bo Ryan, he's tough trainer. He was the fittest player I've ever sort of been around. But, you sort of mix in those guys, Liam Fulton, Bryce Gibson, and Bo Ryan.
That's an interesting mad.
That's an interesting locker room. And then I had some good ones at the Broncos. I remember, the late Andrew Simons. He joined us at the Broncos.
In an off season,
he got sacked from Australia. He went fishing or something. Is that the story? He went out for something. Anyway, he left Australia cricket. And he wanted to come on and train full-time with the Broncos. So I'm not sure if they gave him a contract or not, but they definitely gave him a locker. They gave him a locker, and they give him all his training kit.
Yeah.
And he just joined in as if he was
a
squad player.
Like, what was he?
Nah, he was. What
was he doing?
He wanted to be a Bronco so bad.
Yeah, I played against him. They had a charity game.
Yeah.
And I played in that game. And New South Wales versus Queensland, it was for the Floods,
and
they got the old boys, and he took part of that game, and he was kind of trying to throw his weight around a little bit.
Well, that's what he did, and I've told the story before, but he just became one of the members of the squad. So in the locker rooms, if you've got a little bit of space, the boys love to play cricket. Yeah, well, we had a serious bowler in there now. He was in there just flicking these balls. Like, he was just flicking them and getting guys out. But then, he was joining in all these sessions. I remember I was coming back from injury, and what they used to do is I used to get on the rowing machine, and they'd get me fatigued, and then I'd get off and I'd wrestle one guy and wrestle another guy. And by the third guy, you're losing, you're getting beat. The fourth guy was him. So, he was beating me in wrestling, but I was fatigued, right? But he was winning, right? Yeah. So he got me a couple of times, and then he started giving me a bit of lip, talking, a bit of smack to me about it. So I'll always remember that from him. So, we're on a Mad Monday, and Andrew Simons, he can drink 4X Gold cans. He could drink them for days.
Yeah.
And we're probably about day 2 or day 3, and I was a little bit bored. I was out in the car park. I had a cigarette in my hand, and I flicked it. I flicked it into one of those big bins. The big bins that the trucks come and pick up, and
Big commercial bin.
big commercial bin. I chucked it in there, and it was full of paper and cardboard. And I sort of watched it, and it started to smoke. And I looked at it, and I just thought, I'm just going to leave that. So I walked away, went back in the club, and kept drinking. Next minute, I just heard sirens coming down towards Red Hill. And I come out, and these flames, they're like 2 stories high, these flames. This whole bin's on fire. The plastic lid's been melted off. The firefighters are there. They're trying to put it out. And, I come out. I said, geez, what's going on out here? And I say, everyone's blowing up. Anyway, everyone's pretty drunk. So as the fire's starting to be put out, and I see Andrew Simon, he's standing over there. He's got no shirt on, and he's holding his 4X can. So I went up to the firefighter. I said, can I have a go with that? And he said, yeah, you can. So I grabbed it, and I just turned, and I was about 2 meters away from Andrew Simons, and I pulled the thing, and I just hit him in the face. It almost knocked his head off, and he hit the deck. I just dropped the hose, and I gassed it, and I took off running. So he's chasing me. He's got no shirt on. He's chasing me. He wants to kill me. Running around in circles. We're on the field. Anyway, we end up so far away from the club. We're so far away from the club, and we're both out of breath, and we stopped. And I just said to him, I said, well, what do you want to do here? Like, do you want to go? And he said, let's go. So we just started wrestling, and it was full on. It was a full-on wrestle. And I had him in a headlock, and I had him in a headlock. It was to that point where I said, like, have you had enough yet? And he tapped out. And as I'm holding him in a headlock, I sort of look up, and there's all these sort of old ladies having their little roast meal up at the Lees Club at the Broncos, probably thinking, what are these 2 dudes doing down there? So we had a good wrestle, and that was my payback for all those times during the season where I'd have to wrestle him. And I think he played a game at Wynnum Manly.
Did he?
I think he maybe played reserves or something, but. He loved rugby league.
Yeah, he loved the physical side of
he
things,
loved
didn't
it.
he?
Yeah, and every time there was a streaker on the field, I think that was his opportunity to show him he had a bit of a shot in his bag.
Yeah, he enjoyed the contact.
He's a good dude.
Girds, do you have any that you could touch on? Like, any stories?
When you're getting old and you're just kind of finding ways to get around doing the things that you kind of know that you need to do. We had this trainer come in and with Johnny Lang in the early parts of 2000s, and that's when technology started to become real, and it started to be able to change the way that you got around doing things, because then there was like data and there was reporting and there was GPS and all that sort of stuff. So we had this one guy, and we just won the comp in 03, and I went really hard. That was kind of like, I never thought I'd win a premiership, and I got to win one, and then I really enjoyed it. But then had like a week of celebrating. Then I had to go on a kangaroo tour. And so then I went on the kangaroo tour and got injured in the early part of it. And then Chris Anderson was the coach. He ended up making me like the tour guide. And I would take all the emus, and I was in charge. And then I would have to take them on different trips around Europe, because we're over there in England. And so I went really hard on that. And then I got back, and I got really sick, and it was the early part of the season. And because we won the comp before, we had to go and play the World Club Challenge. And I hadn't played in one. I was trying to get right for it, and I just couldn't. I couldn't recover from the damage that I'd done internally from the partying, right? Like, I had this thing called pancreatitis, and I literally couldn't move. It was heavy. So anyway, it got about 2 weeks before we were trying to go away, and they ruled me out, and I was really upset. I was livid, but they said, "No, mate, we can't risk it. Can't take you over there. So you're going to have to stay, and you're going to have to do all this training because we want you to be right for the season proper," which was like a week after it or whatever it may be. So he said, "Okay." So this guy Watto, he came up and he had this heart rate monitor and he gave it to me, and he said, "Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put this heart rate monitor on you, and whatever it is your heart rate gets to, it's going to be recorded, and I'm going to be able to see it while I'm in England." I'm like, "You're kidding? You can do that? You've got that technology? That's not good.
Yeah.
That's not good. You can do that?" And he said, "Yeah, mate, we can do it. So I want you to do," and he gave me this big program, and he said, "I need your heart rate to be here and here and here and here." I'm like, "Oh, okay, wow, that's a lot of work." He said, "Well, we're playing in a couple of weeks. You've got to be ready for the first week." I said, "Okay, fair enough." So he gave me the heart rate monitor, and off they went. And I was thinking, "Oh, I really don't want to be doing this is just unreasonable. I'm a 33-year-old man, I don't need to be doing that." So anyway, I had a dog at the time. So his name was Jeff. So I took Jeff.
That's not even a dog's name.
Why isn't it a dog's name? So I took Jeff down to the park, and I put the heart rate monitor on him. And I had one of those ball things, and I started throwing the ball. And it didn't have a readout on it, so I didn't know what the heart rate was getting up to. And I hadn't looked into the fact that, what sort of heart rate animals have compared to humans. But I was to find out that it's quite different. So I had Jeff out there for about 40 minutes throwing the ball, and his heart rate monitor was getting up to 280 beats per minute. So I've got the trainer on the phone going, "Mate, what are you doing?" I said, "What are you talking about? I'm working hard." He's like, "Mate, you're dead. Your heart rate's at 280 beats per minute." So anyway, I got busted and fined and all that sort of stuff. And
that's what happens when you're at the end of your career, right? You're figuring out creative ways for someone else to do the work.
Technology. How do they? That was the start of it. Then I thought, I'm out, and I retired that year. I'm like, I'm done.
Guys, that's all the time that we have for listener questions this week on the medicine. But please keep shooting through your questions for the lads, because they will tell many more yarns like they just did. But boys, that's all we have time for.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
It was good. Started off deep.
It was a bit deep, wasn't it? That one? Yeah.
No, we covered some good topics, though. I think
absolutely.
We'll be interested to see our take on that.
Yeah. So, stay connected, guys, and keep sending in, as Dan said, the questions. And we look forward to chatting next week and building this community and doing some cool stuff in the future.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. But as Girds just said, guys, and from all of us here at The Medicine, thank you so much for your support. If you love the podcast, the best thing that you can do is share it with your friends and your family. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could leave a 5-star review, all those things really help us to get up in those charts and stay in your hearts. Did you like that one?
Oh, nice, Dan.
Yeah. If you want to join the medicine community, you can join us on our Facebook group, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. All the links are in the show notes and in our descriptions.